The most important thing that we do, and the first thing we do in a microblading or microshading procedure, is to do a good consultation. And so we have our client fill out the consultation form, and then we're actually going to sit and use this information, and it's very important that you do that. You're having that client spend a lot of time filling out these sheets, and you want them to see that you are using that information, but also for the safety of the client as well as the success of the treatment, we need to have as much information as possible. So Chloe, I went over your consultation form. It looks like you don't really have any health concerns other than a latex allergy. Correct. Is that correct? Okay. And no worries there. We use the nitrile gloves, so there shouldn't be any problem with that. And just to confirm, no problems with any cold sore issues.
No.
Wonderful. Great. And we will be going over the aftercare with you as well. I noticed you hadn't checked that off here, but we will cover that with you. And certainly if any time during the procedure you have questions, be sure to ask. Now, you circle shape for what you would like to improve. Tell me a little bit about what you mean.
As far as shape, just more so, I have a pretty thick brow and color, but more so like the tip towards the end, and the shape as an outline, so I don't have to use an eyebrow pencil.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. And it looks like you have a little bit shorter tip or tail on your right eyebrow here, so we can work to balance that out for you as well. And then as far as color, you're happy with the color you have naturally. We should match that for you?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Great. That sounds good. And confirming that it is microblading you're interested in.
Correct.
Okay, great. And then the second sheet, of course, went over our topical anesthetic. And you have had other procedures before. You've been to the dentist with lidocaine, correct?
Yep.
Do you have problems getting numb, or do you get numb pretty easily?
I'd say it's pretty normal.
Pretty normal? Okay. And pain tolerance?
It's so-so.
Okay, all right. Well, fortunately, microblading really is more discomfort than anything, but you just let us know, and we'll keep you as comfortable as possible. And then the informed consent, you did waive the patch test, which is fine. We always have to offer you a patch test, of course, but then there's a waiting period. And since you really didn't have any, extensive allergy issues other than latex, we feel very comfortable in proceeding. Permanent makeup pigments actually have a very good record of safety and very few incidences of actually having any reactions. So that's great. And then as far as photo consent, you're okay with us using the before and after photos?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. And then the standard tattoo release form, the state of Minnesota requires this. So students, if you are in a state other than Minnesota, they may not require you to have that. But certainly if it is a state that requires it, we have to be sure to do that. And then one point I wanted to make on photo consent is clients must consent to before and after photos. They do not have to consent to having their photos on social media or even in your portfolio, but they must have before and after photos, otherwise we cannot do the service. All right, so again, back to that tattoo release form. If necessary, you'll want to include that information. One thing we do include in our paperwork, because we are a school and we have apprentices, is the level of artists that they are receiving. And that goes all the way from a temporary licensed student to apprentices, to leads, all the way up to master and grandmaster. So in your own practice, if it's just you independently, it's your option how you want to provide that. However, if you are going to be hiring others to work with you, it isn't a bad idea to have that listed, or at least so that they know the level of expertise the artist does have. And then one thing really nice that we have included, and I'm just going to show it, but you'll also see it in your paperwork, is just to confirm with the client what it is that they're looking for. Sometimes clients are confused on the term microblading, and what they're really looking for is more of a powder brow or an ombre brow, and then are disappointed when that's not what they're getting. So we have examples here that they can look at. Also, your portfolio will provide them options and things to look at. And as you're building your portfolio, don't be afraid to use some of the before and after that we provide for you in class. You just have to make sure they understand that isn't your work, that it's another artist's work. So you did have microblading in the past, and that's very, very faded away. And that is, again, what you would like to have.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. And microblading, of course, does provide the most natural look. It's ideal for someone like Chloe, who has a lot of natural brow and just has some areas that need to be built up. But she also has approved the shading, manual shading, and sometimes we do find that we decide to add that, even though they've said only microblading. Shading sometimes is necessary to give a balanced look. And so it's important that you are familiar with that technique, and also that you've talked to your client about that possibility of adding that. And then last but not least, we have a copy of her driver's license. In Minnesota, it is required that they be 18 years old, and you have to be able to prove that. And that's for a tattoo, and of course, permanent makeup falls under that category. Again, if you are coming from out of state, you might have some different laws as far as permanent makeup. They may separate it, or they might have less restrictions on it. So always be sure to check with your Department of Health or your Board of Cosmetology, whoever it is that regulates the service. So Chloe, I don't see any reason that we shouldn't go ahead and proceed with the session. Any questions?
Nope, not at all.
All right, great. Then I would go ahead, I would make sure that I had signed it as the technician providing the service, and we would put this aside, begin the treatment. Please sign these before you start working, not at the end, because you want to make sure you haven't missed anything. And when you're going to each page signing it, you notice things that haven't maybe been checked, or that you're like, oh, I really should discuss this with the client before we begin. And then at the end, there is a space on it for you to put down the type of pigment you used, the blades you used, as well as that's always entered into your booking app. So like Salon Iris is what we use. All right, we're ready to go, and I'm excited to do your treatment. Now I'm going to cover the setup for a tray for a microblading, micro shading procedure. And you can see that we have the tray divided into two different sides. We literally have trays covered with disposable bags. And this is going to help you to keep your tray organized, but also once you have designed the brow, anything that is not 100% disposable or that cannot be sanitizable has to be removed from the tray. So we're going to begin with the design of the brow, and of course we're always wearing gloves through the entire procedure, as well as a form of a mask right now. Here you're going to see that we have our wax pencils. I have a brown and a black, as well as I have a single-edged razor for sharpening them. Now, you may down the road decide to work with something else, and that's perfectly fine, but these really are considered standard in the permanent makeup industry, are very easy to work with, and you do have those in your kits. We have our pre-charcoaled string. We use the string method for designing. This happens to be black, which is what you have in your kits. It is also available in white. So if you're interested in having it in white, certainly talk with us and we'll be happy to source that for you. And we usually do have it in stock. Here is your caliper, and with the caliper, this is going to help you to actually design symmetrical brows, to check your measurements. You're going to check a lot of different things with this tool. So get to know it and get comfortable with it. And you'll be using it throughout the class. So if there's any questions on how to actually get the most out of this, we're happy to work with you on that. Here I have a small scissor and a little spoolie. Now you have spoolies that are in your kit. They're good for brushing the brow before the procedure to kind of see the direction of the hair growth. You can see the spine with the spoolie. But also I would encourage you to add to your kit a small scissors to trim the brows, because if you do have someone who has a very thick brow, very long length in the brow, it is going to be best if you trim those down so that you can actually see the design. The other reason to trim the brow down would be is when they come back in for a touch-up, if they have a lot of brow growth that has grown back, it's extremely hard to go ahead and see where you did the strokes previously, and it's important that you're able to do that. Now, we mark our design prior to numbing so that we do not lose that design. And here I just have a very inexpensive waterproof black liner, and that is what's in your kit. You can use other forms of markers. We really rather discourage surgical markers, the gentian violet markers, only because it's very hard to get that off at the end of the procedure, so it ruins your photographs. But also, they really are designed to be disposed of after each treatment, and that can get rather expensive. So something like this can be easily wiped off and sanitized. Again, you can use traditional Sharpies as well. Those are what are being used in the surgical arenas now and in the hospitals. Now, I have the LidoPro out as our primary number, and we do have a separate video on anesthetic and primary and secondary numbers, so I won't go a lot into detail with this. However, this number is going to numb about 50% faster if we do cover it with some cellophane. And so this is just a regular cellophane, like like a saran wrap, but this does it is in a convenient container that we can just take off a small amount of it, and of course it's an ideal size. Before we begin working, we do need to clean the area, and I have an alcohol wipe. You certainly can use any other type of a wipe if you have other anesthetics. Some companies provide their own pre-wipes as well. And then last on our tray, we do have a little personal razor, and this is for cleaning up any stray hair that is under or over the brow. And we're looking at things like peach fuzz that falls outside of the design. These are disposable, but you can put the cover back on and let your client go home with it. So that's a nice plus. Now, again, once you have designed, you have the client numb, this whole tray is going to come off, and now you're going to be left with the items that you need for the procedure. So on the other side here, I have my microblading tool. I have a shader put out just in case, and again, we haven't decided if we're going to necessarily shade, but by having it ready to go, it prevents having to stop the procedure, remove your gloves, and all of that sort of thing. We have an ample supply of cotton rounds. We do have some wet wipes available, which are very nice for wiping in between your masking. We have some little microfibers. Now these can be used during the designing procedure as well. And we have both the pointed Q-tips as well as the very tiny ones. So those can be used for cleaning up extra wax pencil, smoothing out your line, anything like that. And then also there is a little sponge here that you can use for applying the pigment when you're masking. Now, have enough of these out that you can use them during your design as well as during the procedure, because another thing that you will do is use these little microfines for going ahead and putting on your secondary number. We have a cup out for secondary number, as well as we have, and our cup was hiding under the cotton rounds. We have our secondary number already filled. This happens to be tag 45. I have a pigment ring ready to go for the pigment. And then we have our green soap for cleaning at the end of the procedure or any time that we really need to get a good cleanse and see what we have as far as our strokes go. And this has been covered on the bottom as well as on the sides, so that when we're working, we can just reach down and grab it and not worry about contamination. At the very end, again, anything that has been used will be, that's disposable, will already be in our trash bag here. Please don't let, bloody cotton rounds and things like that build up on the tray. Throw them away after you use them. And then anything else that needs to be disposed of can just be put into the bag. And then anything that needs to be wiped off, you can go ahead and take care of that. We do encourage you as much as possible to use disposable. And so we have the disposable blades that are in your kits, and it's all in one. It's great because it has your handle, your blade, and your little microfiber tip for masking, and then this can go right into your sharps container at the very end, and you have no concerns about having to wet soak or sanitize. So if you have any other questions on the tray setup, again, this is a tray setup for the microblading, microshading procedure. Please ask, and as well with the anesthetic, there is a separate video that we will be covering secondary and primary numbers, so you understand which one to be using when and how to have them prepared on your tray. Now we're going to begin the brow design portion, and the first thing we want to do is look at our client's facial shape, her bone structure, and the brow she already has. Our client has an oval face, a little bit of a longer or higher forehead, very nice natural brows. However, the tails are very short, so we are going to extend those. And remember, when you are designing the tail, it's important not to droop the tail down. That's a common mistake when you're first starting out. You want to angle it out toward the ear. And you're going to see when we're designing that we're angling it out toward the top, about the 2/3 up on the ear. We also did clean the brow up a little bit under the arch and in the front. So we're pretty much keeping the entire brow as is and just building on the tail and giving it a bit more shape. Now we're going to use the string method, and we use the golden ratio, and we're going to put our lines in. We're going to put horizontal and vertical lines that will help us to design symmetrical brows. And we'll start out with straight lines, and then we'll gradually curve them with our pencil in order to give a very beautiful design. So the first line is the middle line. This is the most important. So if you feel you do not have that middle line in the correct place, make sure to redo that. If that isn't in the center, it is going to have everything off. And we're not going down the center of the nose. That is the center of the bridge of the nose. Now we're going to have the starting point, which is from just the curve of the nostril and straight up. Depending on the person's bone structure, it's going to hit at different places. So for some, it's going to hit right where their brow begins. With others, it is going to be a little bit further in or out, and that's fine.
Open your eyes for me.
Now we're going to find the arch, and so we're going from the corner of the nose, and we're going up to the outside of the pupil, and then we have our client close their eye, and first they have to look straight up, and it's important that they're looking at the ceiling.
Okay, right and close.
And then we mark it. Now keep in mind these lines are guidelines. They will possibly be changed as you're designing. And then lastly, the outside is under the corner of the nose, under the corner of the eye, and straight out. Now you also can feel the client's bone, so you can see where the high point is, if you've hit the high point, and get used to feeling that client's brow arcade and bone structure. Now, once we are happy with those lines, we'll go and do our horizontal lines. And the first one is going to be where the brow starts at the bottom. And this can go across because we will use that for designing the second brow. Now this one is going to determine how large the brow is, so really the width of the brow. And so when you put that line in, take a look at it and see, is that a good sized thickness for the brow? And now we're going to feel where the high point is, and you'll actually feel there's a bone there and a little dip, and we're going to bring that straight across. And keep in mind the hair, the actual arch, may not reach up to that point. Just know that. So if we are going to be trying to level out asymmetrical brows, you might find one is higher or lower, and we can work on evening those out. Now, by following these measurements, you will have a brow that will meet the golden ratio, which means from the front of the brow to the arch, you'll have about 2/3 of the brow, and then from the arch to the end of the tail will be about another 1/3. And so we're going to stretch the skin, and we're going to go ahead, mark our points. That is point 1. We have point 2. Point 3 is going to be changeable, but point 3 will never be lower than the front of the brow, which is our point 4. So we can really look at point 4 and then kind of decide where that point 3 should end. We then have point 5 and point 6, which are going to be lines that will guide us as we're designing underneath the brow. Now we're taking our thread and going from point 1 to point 2. Please be exact on the points. That line can be perfectly straight, or it can be designed slightly concave. However, in the beginning, when you're first learning to design, please do straight lines. Now we're going to stretch and lift the brow. And we're going to go from point 2 to point 3, and you can literally follow the bone. Now, you could use thread if you like, but you'll get a beautiful curve just by going from the high point, but you do have to stretch that skin and lift it slightly. Now we can come back from point 3, and I'm heading toward point 6. Stretching, coming back. And now I'm going to be moving from 0.4 over to 0.5 or 5 to 4, either way, whatever works for you, and then meeting those two lines. You stretch side to side. We don't pull up on the brow. We stretch side to side. Otherwise, you're going to get really funny curved lines in the brow. Now we're taking a pointed tip Q-tip and we're going to clean. And we need to have the finest line possible so that we can accurately duplicate this on the other side. We do want to have the client's approval of this design first before we design the other side. This is a lovely shape for her. It extends her tail slightly, works with her natural brow pattern, as well as it will enhance her facial shape. And you can see how clean and thin those lines are.